Hello, and welcome to week 3 of our Career Coaching Corner. My name is Erin Sudrovech, and I'm the director of the Alumni Engagement Program at Oakland University. I'm up here in the corner. This program is a new virtual collaboration between the Office of Career Services and the Office of Alumni Engagement at Oakland University. And as usual, I am joined by two of my favorite people, Kelly Dorner, OU alum, class of 1996, and Matt Karrandja, OU alum, class of 1997. Welcome back, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. We are here this week to talk about common interview questions. So we're going to go through a few things that you might hear commonly during interviews, and Matt and Kelly are going to, as usual, provide their expert opinion and feedback. So hopefully you can utilize that new information for however you are navigating the job market. So let's start first by reviewing backgrounds. Kelly, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Erin. So my name is Kelly Dorner, and I am Director of Internal Operations at Career Services for Oakland University. I've been in that role for going on 5 years. It'll be 5 years in August. And prior to that, my background was in recruiting and human resources, and also spent some time in learning and development for a staffing company. So what I would say is it is absolutely an honor that I have to be able to work with Oakland University students and alumni to help them get prepared for interviews. That's one of the most common reasons why a student or an alum would visit Career Services for advice. And it's absolutely something a space that I'm very comfortable in, because in my years as a recruiter, I've probably interviewed hundreds of people, and happy to be able to share some of that feedback and advice with Oakland University students and alumni. So thanks for having me today, Erin.
Well, thank you, Kelly. We appreciate it. And also, Matt, welcome back. Tell us about yourself.
Erin, thank you so much. This is one of the highlights of my week, is to come on with both you and Kelly and talk to the students and the alumni at Oakland University. As mentioned in the past, I am the Vice President of Sales at a company called LHP Engineering Solutions in Pontiac, Michigan, about 4 minutes from campus, which is a treat for me. I can go back on campus, sneak into the OC and have some Chick-fil-A and some friends. We got about 20 years within sales and recruiting. I've hired over 1,000 people over the course of my career. I've also been a part of a nonprofit called the Career Ministries of Michigan, which offers interviewing tips, outplacement services for and underemployed people that are being affected in the market. So this is a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to giving some insight of our alum and our current students.
All right. Well, thanks, Matt and Kelly, again. We really appreciate it. We're going to dive right in here. One of the very first questions that comes up commonly in interviews is the very ambiguous, tell us about yourself. So, Kelly, what would you recommend in terms of, responding to that question? What would you recommend alumni and students talk about to really set themselves apart?
Absolutely. So some pretty common advice that I end up sharing is, when you think about your objective, whether it be answering this question or throughout the interview, everyone, I think, is pretty commonly familiar with their biggest objective during an interview is to appear qualified, right? Like, that's a very obvious one. But my advice would be, there's a second, almost nearly as important to being qualified for the position and projecting that, is really being able to give the interviewer a sense of who you are by demonstrating your authentic, true self, so that throughout the interview, the interviewer can really have a moment to be able to visualize, what would you look like in their environment? How would you fit in with their existing team? How would you complement other people that are either on that team or collaborating with that team? It's an important thing. And that tell me about yourself is far from being a trick question. It's an opportunity that really is intended to be an icebreaker. It might appear as, tell me about yourself, or sometimes an employer or interviewer might frame it as, walk me through your resume. There's really a variety of variations of it, but it's really all asking for the same thing. And in essence, it's a bit of an opportunity to be able to provide a pitch for yourself, right? So if you think about the way that you can be able to share information for yourself or to project yourself in a meaningful way, relevant to the job description, right? That's an important thing. In probably about 90 seconds or so. So it's really that true elevator pitch. Thinking about what is it about your background and who you are that, in essence, make you a good fit for that role. And so that's some overarching advice that I have about the best way to tackle that question.
That's great. Thank you. Matt, did you have anything to add to that?
No, absolutely. Kelly did a fantastic job. One of the things also, and I'm going to use a lesson learned from one of our previous sessions, is if you have a chance to look at the person that you're interviewing with, LinkedIn page, if there is a common element to that background that is similar to yours, say that person went to Oakland University or was involved in an organization that you belong to as well, you can bring that up during the telling about yourself. Another thing to remember, though, that as Kelly mentioned, it is your professional experience or academic experience. We're not looking back for stories when you're 8 years old. We're looking at most recent accomplishments and turning it into a professional element.
Yeah.
But also being yourself, and that is critical.
Right.
Don't be fake.
So, Matt, the next question that comes up a lot is what makes you the best person for this job, right? And I think Kelly touched on that a little bit, but can you expand on what else you might want to, as the interviewee, touch on when someone says, why should we hire you, right?
No, that's a fantastic question. To be honest, I ask that question all the time. So what I'm doing is I'm engaging the interest of that person, but I'm also getting to understand if they've done research on the position or the organization. So if you're going into an interview, the most important thing that you can do if you're working with a recruiter or you're doing it yourself is to understand the job that you're applying for, the job that you're interviewing with. Understand key points to that job description and hit home on those points. Try to find 3 or 4 bullet points that make you the most qualified and really push those points across to the person that you're interviewing with. If you don't have a job description, maybe prior in the discussion, talk about the opportunity with the hiring manager and try to get a feel for it, but you should have that prior. If you're working with a recruiter, they should be able to provide that for you. If you don't, go onto the company's website. If they're scheduling an interview with you, ask if you could have the job description emailed to you prior. Well, that way you can understand what you are going to be interviewing for. That happens a lot of times when people really don't understand the scope of the job. And so you want to be able to sell 2 or 3, maybe 4 talking points on why you're the most qualified person for that job, and then give real world examples. We don't want to do soft answers. Well, I got good communication skills, or people like me, I'm a team player. No, you want to talk about specifically what you have done. If you're a salesperson or going into a sales role, what revenue targets have you hit? If you're an HR, say HRD, HR development, what training plans you have developed, what you have done, how you have implement those programs into an organization. If you have not had practical experience, maybe you worked at a club or you're a purpose student organization, you can use that same principles for those organizations. So really understand the job that you're interviewing for.
Great. That actually segues really nicely into the next piece that we wanted to cover on this topic of common interview questions, which is talking through strengths and weaknesses. So Kelly, talk to us a little bit about how you can best present your strengths, right, as well as weaknesses and turning those into maybe growth opportunities.
My pleasure. So the strength is actually pretty well aligned with some of the advice that Matt was just giving, right? Which, quite frankly, is often an area that people don't necessarily struggle with as it relates to the question about strengths and weaknesses, right? So the strength is very much along with the advice that Matt gave, just really being familiar with the job description and trying to pick something that is well aligned with what the need is for this position and something that would be a requirement for the job. Having a strength that's aligned with that is perfect. And I think that where people tend to trip and fall on this and skin their knees a bit is on the second half of that question, the weakness. People are often very nervous about that. And I've heard all sorts of advice. This happens to be a question that I feel very strongly about offering folks advice on. My opinion in terms of the best way to answer this question is this is where that authenticity becomes so incredibly important. Thinking back to my years as a recruiter, it was always very evident when someone was just trying to phone this response in and really not being authentic with the way they answered it. So, for example, they may pick a weakness that really is not a weakness. They might say something like, ooh, I tend to take on many things in my existing role, right? I tend to say yes often. And it's one of those things where, yeah, maybe if you spun it a certain way, it could be a weakness. But let's face it, if the fact that you may be a perfectionist is your biggest weakness, I wonder how true to yourself you're really being, right?
Good point.
So the advice that I have is there are certain things you can do there that really sound like a canned answer. Calling yourself a perfectionist and smiling and nodding at the interviewer, hoping that they don't notice the difference, is probably not the best strategy. My suggestion would be to pick something that is a true weakness of yours, right? And to be able to call that weakness out and identify it for what it is. And then on the back end of it, to be able to not just leave it there as something that the employer is now going to have to deal with, but rather to be able to say, I am someone that is, perhaps if public speaking isn't the biggest strength of yours, right? Maybe you call attention to that, but you say, because I know this about myself, I am doing these things to challenge myself in that area. So I am not an advocate for spin your strength into, or spin your weakness into a strength. To me, that's not very authentic. It's more about how do you really call it what it is and talk about what you're doing to mitigate the risk that that's actually going to show up in the workplace.
That's great. That's great advice. Matt, what about you? Do you have anything to add to that?
No, Kelly hit it spot on. But one of the things I always ask this question, I use myself as a prime example. When I get my performance review from my boss, I go, I don't care about my good stuff. Tell me where I need to work on. It's the same thing in the interview. I know that I am not that strong with doing PowerPoint presentations or Excel worksheets. So address that is, as I say, this is one of the weaknesses, is that I'm not most savvy doing PowerPoint presentations or doing macros with Excel. However, I've taken multiple classes over the last couple of years on Cornerstone or whatever site you can use to get the training on those documents and be able to produce a quality document. Okay. One of the other weaknesses that I have is that I am involved in everything, and I need to delegate more. So that's why I have to explain I would have to explain in an interview how I would delegate more instead of trying to take on everything. So understanding your weaknesses, knowing that you're almost admitting fault to it, but then this is how I would overcome it. And done, and I've been successful with it over the course of my career. So it doesn't really hamper, but I recognize it. And I'm fixing that problem. I can tell you right now, if someone tells me, they give me a canned answer, or if they don't have any weaknesses, they're not getting hired. Because I like to work with honest people. And everybody has a flaw.
Right.
So
coming back to that authenticity piece that Kelly spoke about.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, so our last question, Matt, I'm going to put this one to you first about handling pressure. So when your prospective employer, your interviewer says to you, tell me about a time where you were under a lot of pressure at work and how did you remain calm and focused and how did you handle it and see that project through? What would be your recommendations to answering that interview question?
Well, Erin, you already mentioned one of the words, authenticity, or being honest with it. One of the things that I'm looking for, if the solution wasn't correct or you couldn't hit the timeline correctly is being able to handle the pressure, working with your team. One of my biggest struggles when I'm interviewing a person, I ask them, well, what was your greatest accomplishment, or how did you handle this problem? Well, I did this, I did this, I did this. Okay, well, did you do this, or was it your team? Well, I was on the team that handled this. So what did you do? I had a very minuscule task, a part of it. Well, that's not part of the project. Tell me how you handled this. Tell me about the deadline that you had to hit. How did you hit the deadline? Well, we didn't really hit the deadline. I left work at 4 o'clock, 4:30. We didn't manage the project efficiently. That's not what I want to hear. If you still didn't hit the timeline, but you're working to 7, 8 o'clock, you're working with your team, you're trying to hit all the deliverables, I respect that. So the important thing with that is just making sure that you're very true to yourself and very honest.
Sure, absolutely. Kelly, how about you? What are your thoughts on that? Handling pressure, when and how are you getting your work done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that I want to point out there is that when you're being interviewed, anytime that an interview question starts with, tell me about a time when, that is what we refer to as a behavioral interview question. And so there really is a proper way to respond to those. Always put yourself in the mindset of being able to give a specific example, right? Don't speak broadly if they've asked for a specific time when you've applied a skill. And there's actually a formula to it that's called STAR, which stands for situation, task, action, result. And without going into that ad nauseum, what I'll share from a 30,000-foot view is be very specific. Talk about the action that you took in that to apply that skill and what the outcome was. And they're looking for something that is not a broad response, a very specific example. And then in addition to that, I think that one of the reasons why candidates sometimes feel a little bit squeamish about those behavioral interview questions is that it is easy to get caught off guard if you're not anticipating having to give an example of when you're under pressure. There's actually a bit of a method to the madness here that I tend to give folks a little bit of a secret on, if you will. And that is, if you look at a job description, in the requirements section, you'll see a list of skills like must know Microsoft Excel, must be able to code using C++, whatever it is, right? Must have 3 to 5 years of this particular hard skill. And with that, there are often additional things. Must be able to communicate well in an oral and written fashion. Must be able to work well under pressure, whatever it is, right? My advice to folks that are preparing for interviews is, as you review that job description, you review those requirements, take a few minutes to think about what are your best examples of a time when you've applied that stuff. Right? So if it's good communication skills or working under pressure, what's the best example that you have of a time that you've demonstrated that skill? If you do that for each of the skills listed in the job requirements, my experience has been that you typically go into that interview with like an arsenal of stories to choose from that are well aligned with requirements for the job that will help you to feel less caught off guard by those behavioral interview questions.
Erin, let me add on that real quickly, and I'm going to give our audience a free tip on this. Kelly mentioned about the STAR interview. So our favorite friend, our favorite OEM in Auburn Hills, they use the STAR interview exclusively. So FCA uses it, Blue Cross Blue Shield. A lot of the big organizations do the STAR interviews. So going to your first interview and doing a STAR interview the very first time is probably not practical. You need to practice. I know Oakland University does mock interviews, or to somebody else and have them coach you. Go online, go to Google, whatever you have to do to practice, because the first time they're asking you about a situation or a task or an achievement or a result, which is what STAR stands for, you don't want that to be the very first time. So take advantage of the tools that are provided for you, because if you are interviewing at FCA or General Motors, you will have the STAR interview.
That's great. That's great advice. And actually, it tees up really the conclusion of our third video here. One of the things that we always like to do is share resources for where our alumni can go for more information. And Kelly, why don't you tell them about Handshake and Career Services?
Absolutely. So if you're on the Oakland University website, you can either search for career services or just type in oakland.edu/career services, and you can find our information there. And one of the things that you'll find on our website, in addition to more information about our office, you'll also see a link to Handshake. You have access to Handshake as an alumni, and you'll find that in the resource section of Handshake, there are all sorts of tools to help folks get ready for interviews. As well as an alumni, you're more than welcome to meet with a member of my team, and we can conduct a mock interview or practice interview with you. So that is one thing that I would recommend doing to help yourself get prepared.
Sure. And definitely the Oakland University Alumni Association has our Facebook presence and our LinkedIn presence, so you can go online there. And I know Matt knows so much about LinkedIn. It's a great place to network and connect with people and find more information as well. So hey guys, I think that about wraps up our third video. So thank you again for working through common interview questions, and really appreciate your time. And to those of you out there listening, we're really excited to offer a fourth video next week, which is going to be about keeping yourself motivated in the job search. So we'll hopefully see you next time. And thanks again. Bye guys.
Bye.